Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're doing It Came From The Network. For this month's It Came From The Network, we're going to follow a theme. Much like we have the past few months, we've given a theme to it. Now, I thought long and hard, what should my theme for March be? Well, later this month, March 22nd, is my birthday. And I'm not saying this to get any gifts, any presents or anything. I don't mean that in any way. But the theme of this is going to be stuff that's important to me. Basically, this is my happy birthday month of videos. And every video I review this month is going to be something that resonates with me, whether it be a show I went to, whether it be a moment in wrestling that really solidified my fandom, whether it be just a personal favorite of mine having a big moment. These are all going to be something that touches me personally. And to start it off, we went to WWE Old School, marked as Season 17, Episode 6, from August 27th, 1998. This is an event that happened at the Philadelphia Spectrum, and the reason it resonates with me, I was there. I was there with my stepfather. We used to go to these Spectrum matches every month, and at the time, they would record them, and then they would replay them a week later on a local cable channel called Prism, which if you grew up in the Philadelphia area, you probably have fond memories of Prism. That's where you watch your Flyers games, your 76ers games. I believe they even had the Phillies on there, but I might be wrong on that, because the Phillies were on pretty much every day, so I forget exactly what channel they were on. But I know for a fact I would watch Flyers and Sixers games on Prism. And then it was kind of a hybrid between Sports Channel and HBO. They would have new movies or newer movies at the time. And every month, a week after the event happened, they would have their own special show where it was just Philadelphia Spectrum Wrestling. And it would be the event in an edited form. And this is that event. With that being said, if you haven't seen my videos before, I do grade everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Let's jump right into this. First, we're introduced to our announce team, which is Dick Graham, who was tied in with the Spectrum presentation. He wasn't a WWE announcer. Lord Alfred Hayes, and Superstar Billy Graham, no relation to Dick. And immediately, you may notice, this really isn't the greatest team. Dick Graham was decent. He was very much sports-based. He seemed to somewhat know what was going on in the world of wrestling. I wouldn't say he was a great announcer. He worked well when he had someone like Gorilla Monsoon with him, who did some of these shows, and I think Ventura did some of the shows as well. This is not a good grouping, so the commentary doesn't add much. Let's jump right into our first match. We have the Hart Foundation versus the RoJo brothers, and this was kind of a double turn, as the Hart Foundation had left Jimmy Hart's stable and were kind of turning face, and the RoJo brothers were somewhat turning heel, were already in the way of a heel turn, but hadn't yet became part of Jimmy Hart's group of talent. And this was kind of them in that era and that feud that pretty much set off that change for both of them. This was interesting and fun, and hearing like Dick Graham commentating how Bret Hart and Jimmy Anvil Neidhart have been such ruthless villains and he doesn't understand how people cheer for him, and then seeing the connection and them talking, especially Superstar Billy Graham, talking about the connection that Bret and Neidhart have with the crowd. It's really good. I like this match. I do think it suffered a bit. All these matches do suffer from the same thing a bit. The 80s WWE style is not the greatest style of wrestling to go back and watch. It can be very boring. This wasn't what I would say boring, but it felt like it was padded out. In other words, this was roughly a 20-minute match that felt like they had 15 minutes or 12 minutes of a match and stretched it out as far as they could. Ultimately, the RoJos do pick up the win after some underhanded tactics, switching out and the illegal man making the pin. I thought this was good. I'm going to give it a 3. Like I said, if they could have trimmed it down a bit, I think it would have been better. Next up, we have Ted DiBiase going up against Randy Macho Man Savage for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. Savage has Miss Elizabeth with him, and DiBiase has Virgil. And I want to say this, and you've probably seen in the beginning of the video, rest in peace, Virgil. You were highly entertaining. Even if it was the memes of the last few years, leaning into that and being okay with that joke, even going back to this time. As a kid, when Virgil finally turned on DiBiase or turned face on DiBiase and finally got tired of him, I was all in. I was cheering for Virgil. I was rooting for Virgil. He was someone I wanted to see beat DiBiase and get his comeuppance, which was why the story was so well told. So rest in peace, Virgil. You are appreciated. Thank you for everything you did. Now back to the match. This is probably my favorite match of the show. I mean, it's Ted DiBiase and Randy Savage. They're two of the best wrestlers in the world at this time. It could be argued that they're the two best wrestlers in the world at the time, except for the fact that Ric Flair exists and Barry Windham and others, but I digress. This was a really fun match. I like these two as opponents. These two always work well against each other. I think what kind of hurt this match and hurt this card again, it's a longer match. It didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome like the first match did, but it did feel at times like it was dragging a bit. And they did make it up more than the first match with the Hart Foundation and the RoJos. In this match, it felt like the talent made up for that fact. This is also very close to SummerSlam. I think it was only 2 or 3 days away from SummerSlam. So you knew going into this, or I know now going into it, back then, being an 11-year-old kid, I had no idea that nothing of consequence would happen on the show. But of course, nothing's going to happen of consequence on the show when you got a pay-per-view less than a week later. Ultimately, Savage does pick up the win when Virgil gets involved and gets DQ'd. I thought this was a really good match. The only thing that's stopping it from being a great match is the fact that, like I said, it did feel it dragged a little bit at times. And even the ending, I thought the ending was perfectly acceptable. I'm going to give this one a 4. I thought it was really good. I do enjoy these two working with each other. Now, last but not least, the third and final match on this episode, Jake the Snake Roberts versus Ravishing Rick Rude. And this was right in the middle of their feud where Rick Rude had said a bunch of things about Jake's wife. And again, this is just fun. I like these two as opponents. The psychology in this, and much like the one before, the psychology in all three of these matches, to be perfectly honest, is top notch. I mean, here you have some of the great wrestlers of the time again. Jake could put together a match almost as good, if not better, than anybody else in pro wrestling. Rick Rude at this time is probably one of the better heels in pro wrestling. It's a shame that Rick Rude never got to win the WWF Championship because he was that good. He deserved that championship. He was just such a heat magnet, and also undeniable how good he was. Even if you hated him, you couldn't hold it against his talent. He was so talented. And he looked like $1 billion. Look at him. I mean, he looks great. This was a really fun match that had a really good ending in a way, while also knowing that they weren't going to do anything that ended the feud here. It comes down to their brawling on the outside, and Rude makes it in just before the 10 count, but Jake doesn't. So Rick Rude wins by count out. After the match, Jake gets his comeuppance, puts Damien on him. I really enjoyed this. I'm going to give this one a 4. I thought it was enjoyable. Now, overall, I may be looking at this through rose-tinted glasses, and my experience of remembering that day and remembering going there. And if you watch this, the crowd is very small here, which I didn't remember. I always thought the crowd was packed when I went to the Spectrum, and it felt like it was packed. I didn't remember that it was only, 4,000 or 5,000 people in a stadium that held 20, but it always felt like it was packed. I remember this day. I remember the DiBiase and Savage match. I remember the Rick Rude and Jake the Snake Roberts match. I remember the Hart Foundation and the RoJos. And this was a fun show. I had so much fun going to these with my stepfather, who was my two brothers' father. Unfortunately, he has since passed, but this is one of those memories. When I think of him and when I think of my childhood, these are some of the things that really stick out. Us watching wrestling together, us going to wrestling together. That's the one thing we really connected on. There were a lot of things we butted heads on, especially when I became a teenager and I was an idiot teenager. We butted heads a lot, but there was always this. There were always these moments that I could treasure for the rest of my life. Hence why I picked this, and that may be why my ratings for this may be a little higher than yours if you go back and watch it. And I understand if you don't have the same feeling or the same connection to this. If you didn't grow up in this era, you may look at this and, like I said, you may say these are boring long matches, which I kind of agree with. But watching it back for me, It was special. Overall, I'm going to give this a 4. I really enjoyed going back and revisiting this. Like I said, this is why I picked it. It's one of those things that just resonated with me. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It was a fun show to watch, and it was only an hour long, which makes it an easy watch. I would say I do recommend checking this out. Maybe listen to a podcast instead of the commentary, because the commentary is not great. Unless you do have those memories of Spectrum Wrestling and hearing Dick Graham's voice, and by all means listen to him. But yeah, it was just a fun show. With that being said, let's smash that like button, share the video, subscribe if you haven't. If you see where it says join, that's how you become a channel member. Becoming a channel member would definitely help me out. Shout out to Chris for being a channel member. I definitely appreciate you, my friend. You definitely helped me out. And if you could, I'm trying to get to 1,500 subscribers by WrestleMania, which is a little bit over a month from the time this is being recorded. At this moment, I'm hovering right at 1,400. So if you haven't subscribed, please consider hitting that. And if you have, let's share the video. Let's see if we could get some other people to help. Getting more subscribers is going to definitely help with the algorithm and help generate some revenue for the show, which will help me to do some things. I just recently had to scrap a video because in the middle of the video, my light box that I use, which if you watch some of my unboxings, I use it for littler things in unboxing. Spoiler, you're not going to see the video because it didn't come out, but I had a whole box of unopened 91 WCW cards, and the light box just totally fell apart. I had patched it up to where I was going to use it before, and in the middle, it just, everything broke, and I couldn't use the video. So becoming a member, getting more revenue, helps me to get equipment like that. And I know it's not a sob story, I'm just saying that's what it's used for. Like, if you may notice, if you've watched my show for a while, the sound's a lot better, the lighting's a lot better, the camera work is a lot better. These are all things that I bought with the revenue from the show. I digress. With that being said, if you made it here to the end, let me know a wrestling event that resonates with you from your childhood. Whether it's something you went to, could be just a house show, could be a local indie show, could be maybe your brother, cousin, uncle, aunt, sister was a wrestler. Let me know down in the comments something that resonates with you from your childhood. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching It Came From The Network.